Hi, and welcome to the Chatty Cuppa. It's the next episode, and I'm really excited to be talking to you about this. It's all about food and mood. And I know that food is something that we cannot live without. The human body can survive for up to 21 days without food and water. But if you look at us everyday people, we cannot go for a few hours without eating. And I wonder why our bodies respond to the way we feel about food, and that feeling of food affects the way we think and the way we perform our duties. Now, in my home, I love food. In fact, my entire family, we are such foodies. We love cooking, and I'll hold my hand on my heart. I hate when cooking becomes a chore, but I love trying out new foods. And my family does so too. We have this appreciation for food. And I know for a fact that food is this huge social interaction and family togetherness. And today I have somebody very special, and she's going to give me all the wonderful tips on how our mindset can be affected with food. Now, let me welcome you to the gorgeous Victoria Bell. She's a registered nutritionist and therapist, and she studied neuropathy, and she has been practicing in Hertfordshire in 3 different clinics, and she supports her clients on health and well-being and digestion issues, food intolerance, low energies, and even poor immunity. Now, Victoria's approach to nutrition has been motivated by her own struggles. Now, I know we all have a story to tell, and these stories that we experience in our lives actually become the perfect moment where we decide that that is the point where we change. So welcome, Victoria, and I'm so honored to have you on the Chatty Cuppa. And we are talking about something that is, I think, in every person's mind every single day. A little bit about yourself, Victoria.
Well, thank you very much for the welcome, and it's really good to be here. So I started out not in nutrition at all, and I didn't really know the basics of nutrition coming out of school. And so I spent quite a lot of years eating really badly, and I had 2 children in my late 20s, and at the point when I had them, I still wasn't particularly clued up on eating well, but I was feeling ill all the time. And when they were very little, I knew that I needed to make some big changes for my health and to show them the way to go forward. So I chose to leave my career, my previous career. I was working in finance for over 10 years. And that was part of the catalyst. So working too hard, not eating properly, not sleeping enough, probably
From
going out
finance to food.
Yeah, finance to food, and there's quite a lot of other nutritionists who worked in finance before, so it must be almost a natural progression. Yeah, and so I left my finance role and retrained and spent 3 years in college learning nutrition right from the basics to the really high level science of it all. And it's been a fascinating journey.
Did you find that you had this love for it, that you went into this career? Because usually everybody's first careers are usually what their passion is and so on. So when you became a nutritionist, was this like inside you, you knew that this was like a deep yearning to help people with similar problems?
Yeah, so it was quite a long journey. So when I was choosing what career to do out of college, because I ummed and ahed over whether or not to go on to university or whether to just start working, and I knew that I really wanted to help people, and I was thinking of training in physiotherapy or occupational therapy. And back then, so this is 20 years ago. You know, nutritional therapy wasn't something that was on my radar at all, and my eating was awful. And through my early 20s, I went through every single diet you can imagine, and it was through this natural progression of realizing what was really important about nutrition, so the whole natural foods, and that took a long time to come round to. But when I was thinking about returning to work with my my younger daughter was just about to turn 3, and I knew that I didn't want to go back to finance, and I had this passion for food. I enjoyed going to food shows and read loads of health magazines and articles and so on, and so all the pieces were starting to kind of come together from all directions. And when I did a bit of a mind map of, well, what would I really want to see myself doing in 5 years' time? And so, as well as going to food shows and learning about food and nutrition, I wanted to be surrounded by like-minded people, and I wanted to help people. So everything that I wrote on paper like 5 years ago, I'm now seeing in my life. So
well done to you. That's amazing. And it's amazing to see that in such a short while that you can lift yourself up from your own problems, and you can be helping other people, and you use your platform and your story to do that. Now, why do you think people suffer with eating problems and, this weight management issues? People have these yo-yo diets and so on. Why do you think people usually go through this?
Okay, so there's so many different angles, so many different reasons, and we're all unique, so we've all got our own upbringings and experiences, so we can't really reduce it down to any particular one or two things for everybody. So I've got a few thoughts on it. And so firstly, in the last, say, 30 or so years, the evolution of convenience foods and ready meals and takeaways and so on, everything's become easy to get hold of, and sometimes the convenience foods are, or would seem to be, the cheaper options and the more affordable options, and a lot of those foods are really high in energy and energy dense, but not necessarily full of nutrients.
I find it so weird. I find it so weird that these foods are so convenient, and it's convenient at a very cheaper price than fresh produce. Because it's just like a magnet that attracts people to go for the convenient way because of their busy, hectic lifestyles.
Yeah, and you can see why it's an attractive option, but yes, a lot of those products, the manufacturers have created a need for something that didn't previously exist, and in the past, hundreds, well, even decades ago, we had to farm our food off the land, and people would use a lot of energy, walk into the local place to buy their food, and now we can just get in a car and go to the shops or order it online and so on. So there's all these different reasons why that becomes an easier option, and obviously people are really busy in their jobs and looking after children, so that's one of the angles. And then of course there's the advertising around that, and how can you miss all the signs that are everywhere for these products that promise feeling good, and that's the socially acceptable way of eating. It's the done thing, and that's what is kind of programmed into us from all these adverts all around us, and they're not saying.
But it's like so misleading. It might seem like, that's what the pictures look like and that's what you might feel like. But actually, do you find lots of people that are your clients, when they come to you, they are moving away, you help them to move away from convenient foods to actually cooking nutritionist meals?
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting. So with age, I think we start to tune back into what our bodies are really asking for. So a lot of my clients have already done a bit of the work by the time they get to me, and they've started to connect eating whole fresh foods with feeling better. And so a lot of people have already started to maybe make changes. Not everybody, but yes, there's definitely a connection between how we feel and the convenience foods. And then there's so many other reasons why people struggle. So you know, food might have been treated as a reward with children, and you know, you either get these foods because you've been good, or foods are withheld because you've been naughty, or
How
you know.
do you feel about this? How do you feel about parents using food as a reward system? Because I know some of the kids that I see for mindset issues, a lot of it stems from that. You know, the wrong kind of message has been sent to them about food and nutrition from their parents.
And you know, it's understandable that this happens, and it's just a social norm that we've all been taught, and so you know, there's no it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just a behaviour that we've all learned, and so it is very common. And even in schools, sometimes kids are rewarded with sweets or chocolates, and it's just something, almost a generational thing, where that was the done thing, and you just kind of fall into it so easily as well. And I can see why. You know, you get instant results if you
Instant
reward.
gratification.
Yeah, and ways as well. So the child might get instant gratification because they get the reward, and the parent then gets the reward of having the desired behaviour from the child. So it kind of goes the two ways, and unfortunately there's no quick and hard and fast rule to get around that. Sometimes you have to go through, you know, finding a slightly harder but, you know, longer term path to get the right behaviour, or you know, even understanding why the child is acting out, or you know, then just might be another way around it, but it's not necessarily with food.
I know that you're a nutritionist, but you're also a mom. And I know there's so many moms out there that would want to know, how do you actually put in a healthy eating, a healthy, you know, this awareness in your own family with your own kids?
So there's lots of things that I do. So leading by example. So if your children see you choosing the fresh and whole foods, and that's just what you do every day, and you don't label it as good or bad, and you just show your children, this is what I do, this is how I eat, and you might talk about the health benefits, and I eat vegetables because, you know, they're good for my body, and those sorts of things. So we talk about the good things about food, and sorry, my little one's in the corner, just so
She can come on,
appeared here. I'm sorry.
Everybody.
I'm sorry if I seem a little bit distracted, but she's just here lurking. Yeah, so we don't talk about food being good or bad, but we might talk about we're recording, by the way, this is going to go online. Yes, so we might say, well, this food is healthier because, you know, it's full of fibre and it's got lots of vitamins and nutrients in, and this food has lots of sugar in, so that might be bad for your teeth, or you know, you might feel good now, but later on you might not feel so good. And we talk about it in that way instead, and the children make their own educated choices then about you know, when's okay to eat something. You know, we don't have any banned foods, and they can have anything that they like, but in moderation. So, you know, if they have you know, some chocolate, they know that that's it for the day, you know, that
It's in moderation.
everyday moderation.
Now, a few years ago, I think it must be about 5 years ago, I was going on holiday, so I wanted to do a very quick weight loss. And I saw everybody ranting about banting and high protein, high fat diet. And so I decided I'll do it for 5 weeks. And in 5 weeks, I was like smiling from ear to ear because I lost about 12 kilos in 5 weeks. But being a vegetarian, I ended up having a very, very high fat diet, to be healthy fats. But the sad thing is, a year later, I ended up going to hospital for something and I had some tests done. And they actually, the doctor saw a little bit of fatty liver. And it was so weird. He asked me 2 questions. He says, "Do you drink?" And I said, "No, I don't." He says, have you been on any fad diets? And it was so then I realized, oh my God, it was a year ago when this happened. But thank God my liver's fine now. And that was a day when I promised that I'm never going to go on any diet or even recommend dieting to anybody, because that was the day when I decided, having a balanced diet, having a balanced nutritionist, nutrition-rich diet is going to be the way for me and my family. And I'm so glad I did that, because I've been feeling better than ever, and which is awesome. Now, I want to talk a little bit about sugar, because I hear so many people saying, I have people coming to me saying that, please hypnotize me, I want to get rid of eating chocolate and sugar. And I'm going to go back to a little bit of my own knowledge and my background on what I've studied. Now, I know people take the feeling of love and they associate it with sugar. And when you go for dinner to a friend's house, the last part of the meal, everybody's waiting for, that's dessert. Most of the celebrations, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Diwali, or any of the celebrations, festivals that take place, I know with Indian families, we love giving a box of sweets or a box of chocolate or cake. And we associate sugar as an extension of love. I know it feels like that's the right thing to do, but it isn't the right thing for our bodies. And sugar is more like a comfort food. And whenever we are feeling down or depressed, we do go for comfort foods. We do go for fatty foods and sugar. Why do you think that people usually have this attraction? What is your version or your story when it comes to why people are attracted so much to chocolate and sugar in their diets?
So firstly, the brain feeds on sugar. So the quickest energy for the brain is going to be glucose. And often when we're tired, as an example, we're going to crave sugary foods for that very reason, because it's the quickest way of the brain carrying on functioning. And sometimes if we're ignoring our signals that we're tired and, we've had a long day, but we still want to sit and relax in front of the TV, the brain might think it's under some kind of threat. So it thinks, well, actually, if I have some sugar, I can carry on and just stay alert. Mm-hmm. There's also a neurochemical process. So we have these brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, mm-hmm. and they communicate messages both ways, from our body to our brain and vice versa. And some of those are ones that make us feel good. So endorphins, which we associate with the high after we've had some exercise, dopamine, and dopamine and endorphins are quite closely linked with our sugar intake, so we can get a rush of those chemicals, and so that can reinforce that behaviour. Mm-hmm. So sugar can be quite addictive, and yes, we do associate sugar with like you said, showing affection and celebrating, and so it is a natural behaviour that we reinforce with our traditions. So it is really, it can be very difficult for people to unpick that.
Yeah.
And one thing I always recommend, especially for people that maybe crave sweet foods, especially in the evening, is to increase foods that give them the proteins that they need for some of the other brain chemicals. So there's serotonin, which is the happy neurotransmitter. And we also need melatonin to help us sleep. So both those neurotransmitters need tryptophan from our foods, and tryptophan is found in some of the things that you would associate with protein, so especially poultry, some fish, eggs, and so on, but also some of the things you wouldn't think of, like soybeans and dairy, also banana and strangely cherries. So there's a few other things that you can consider, especially if somebody's vegetarian, but I would say trying to get some of those in the afternoon and the evening especially helps to curb those sugar cravings.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's really good advice. I know that healthy eating, when I speak to my clients and they come to me for the mental state and the emotional state behind that, and especially for weight loss too. Now I go back to the root, and I use hypnotherapy for that, and rapid transformational therapy. And it's weird that when I take my clients back to why they have such a deep connection with sugar or chocolate or food cravings or fatty foods or whatever, and it always boils down to not feeling great about themselves, wanting love that's unavailable to them. And like how you explained that these neurotransmitters send these messages to the brain, and that is why, like, even women at the end of the month, when they are experiencing their menstrual cycles, they love chocolate. My husband used to buy me a small bar of chocolate a week before my menstrual cycle, and I found that the most loving thing, because he knows that I was like a monster during my periods when I used to have I used to suffer with extreme PMS, and that bar of chocolate started to make me smile a week before, and it was actually helping curb that, but it wasn't long term, it was just short term. And I always recommend nutrition and foods that they eat, whether it's for my clients that I'm helping with cancer or bipolar or weight management or eating disorders or all of those issues. Now, why is eating healthy so important and vital in self-care?
Okay, I just wanted to touch on one thing before we cover that, because the chocolate is another thing where actually if you go for better quality, higher cocoa chocolate, it's got polyphenols in, which are plant chemicals, and some of those are antioxidants, which are actually good for you, and theobromine, and it actually does help support mental well-being. So actually, I think your husband was onto something there, and I would just say, for anybody that thinks of trying that, just try and go as high cocoa as you can.
Yeah.
And also, if you struggle with sleep, maybe don't have it too late in the evening, because it is like caffeine, so it will keep you awake. But just going back to your question, which was about was it about
self-care?
Self-care,
Self-care.
Self-care. So we only have one body, and what we eat will influence our health today, but also over time and into our futures. So actually, by putting the right foods into our body, we're not only taking care of ourselves today, but we're securing ourselves a better future. And as we've already discussed, it can also affect our state of mind. So by eating well, we can be the best version of ourselves. So if food supports good moods and stable energy, then we're going to have more energy to be happy around our loved ones and our friends, and we will start to feel positive and also behave in a positive way towards other people.
Yeah.
And that's all good for our self-esteem. Also, if we put foods into our body, and we don't have to be perfect all the time, it's never about extremes or perfection, but if we are constantly putting in foods that we know aren't good enough for us, we're almost reinforcing an idea that we're not good enough, that we don't deserve better quality foods. And deep down we know that that can't be true. We all deserve to eat a good diet, and we deserve to be healthy, and we deserve to feel well and happy. So I think every day eating good food is self-care, and it's also, as well as showing ourselves some love, we're modeling it for our children as well.
Definitely.
And then our children will copy that, and that's what we want.
Yeah. And when it comes to self-care, I think when people feel great about themselves, and most of my clients that suffer with weight problems, or they might have eating disorders, and it always stems down from, wanting something that's unavailable to them, which is love, and also the feeling of being different. And when people feel that they are different, they find it very hard taking care of themselves and transferring that love onto them. And that's when working with the mindset is so important. So they develop this confidence about themselves, so that they start to make better choices in their self-care, make better choices with their foods, and so on. Now, I'm going to talk about, and I'd love your input on this. And me being vegetarian is also a big part of this. Now, we know how food affects our moods. And we know that, people eat chocolate because the cacao plant has natural stimulants to stimulate serotonin and so on. Now, I know that many spiritual seekers, especially people want to get into meditation and start to go more within themselves. Many of them go on like diets where there's no garlic and there's no onion and things like that, because they say that it stimulates the part of their mind where it keeps them active rather than helps them in stilling and having this focus. Now, I know that in Hinduism, because I'm a Hindu, most of our practices would be to abstain from garlic and onion, and because of more so for the meditation. Now, I know that many people also now are moving towards a plant-based diet, and they're becoming vegetarians or vegans. And I know it's not just about saving the planet and not causing harm on animals. Now, I know at the time when an animal, I was doing some research on this, and I was looking at some of the work of Jamie Oliver. When I was doing some research on it, I was actually looking at when the time when an animal is actually slaughtered, the emotions and the mental state of that animal at that time. And during that time, that animal goes through so much of pain and fear. And like us, when we go through pain and fear, our body gets pumped up with cortisol and high levels of dopamine, and these become toxic for the body. We fall ill when we have too much of this. So that muscle and the meat of that animal gets pumped up with all of these toxins. Do you think this is a huge problem when it comes to people falling ill? You have so many people suffering with IBS and cancers and things like that. Do you think that could be also a reason why we suffer with so much of ailments nowadays. And that is when we want to move towards veganism or vegetarianism or...
It's hard to describe scientifically what might be happening there. So yes, it's possible that if, as you say, animals are holding lots of cortisol in their body tissues and we're consuming that, it would be interesting if there are any studies on the impact on us. I'd need to look to see if there are studies that describe what the outcomes are for people. For people making that decision to move towards a plant-based or vegan diet, as you said, there are lots of different reasons, and there's other reasons why meat might not suit people, or some meats. So for example, meats that have been factory farmed and pumped full of other chemicals as well. Animals also consume things that might have absorbed pollutants in the air or in the soil. The bigger the animal, the more pollutants it tends to absorb. And also with things like antibiotics that they've consumed, even hormones that have been pumped into the animals. So there's all those other things that might be affecting people adversely. And some people definitely have a more sensitive system than others. It seems like some people can eat all manner of things that somebody else might not be able to tolerate. I've noticed a lot of women that are kind of nearing menopause might find that for them it suits them to go more towards a plant-based diet. And some people really struggle with going vegan or vegetarian, and that could be for a whole number of different reasons. So you'd have to look into their unique circumstances and just find out why, you know, they might need support with certain nutrients, or they might not absorb certain things very well. So it's hard to say categorically if that particular aspect of the abattoir and what that does to an animal, whether that then translates into what we then absorb. But I'm open to everything, and I think there's so much that science hasn't proven yet that you know, we have to be open to the possibility that, you know, there are things that we don't see, touch and feel that could be there. So,
and it's like so interesting when you start to research it. And being vegetarian, I've been vegetarian for like over 27 years, and I noticed that I now, after 27 years of being vegetarian, I have a B12 deficiency. So it's weird that how your body knows exactly what it needs, and at a certain time in your life when you need more of. I know that some of the people that you work with, you know, experience lots of challenges, you know, food challenges when it comes to nutrition. And what do you do to help your clients to overcome their challenges?
okay, there's lots of different challenges. So
what's your top three?
my top three are budget. So as we discussed earlier, it can seem as though convenience and processed foods might be the cheaper option, and I can see why that would seem the case. But then when you think about how much people are spending on their processed foods, if you replace all those with whole natural foods, actually there isn't that much difference in the price. But we all know that there's kind of different levels of health foods, and just because certain things have been deemed to be superfoods doesn't mean that people need all those things. For example, if you take something like acai berries or goji berries, You know, they've both been described as having high levels of vitamin C, but you can get really high levels of vitamin C from blackberries, strawberries, raspberries, citrus fruit. So actually we don't need all those really expensive superfoods. It's just showing my clients how to eat well on a budget. So things like using frozen vegetables often are cheaper and more affordable than fresh, and also they keep for months in the freezer, whereas fresh might go off more quickly than they can use it. So things like that.
Sorry, when it comes to the budget, I had one of my clients, we were talking about healthy eating and nutrition because she came in for weight loss. And she says, oh my God, it seems as if only rich people survive eating healthily on this earth. And it actually got me thinking. And I started looking at Milton Keynes here, and I started doing some research on some of the low-income areas in Milton Keynes and their lifespan, and why could their lifespan be shorter. And it's so weird how money even has a huge impact on our nutrition and healthy eating and healthy living.
Yeah, so the sad thing is, when you look at the areas where people have the lowest incomes, if you look at what's actually available in their vicinity to buy food from, it's going to be like the small off licenses and the convenience shops. It's not necessarily going to be you know, the bigger supermarkets or greengrocers and butchers and so on. And so yes, already straight away, a lot of people don't necessarily have a car, and they've got to get everything on foot or by bus. So if that's all they can get to, then they're going to already be limited by what's available. And also, as we were talking about earlier with advertising, so we have advertising telling us all the time that these convenience foods, you know, this is only 99p, or that's only 1.99, and you know, meal deals and so on. So you know, I can see how it's very hard to see from a certain perspective how just being able to eat normal fresh and whole foods is actually affordable. And it is about just knowing the basics of nutrition, and then being able to make a healthy meal out of anything on a budget. And that is possible. It's just you know, it's just a case of knowing how to. So the second challenge would be time. So people are busy, and a lot of mums don't have the luxury anymore. Well, it's not a luxury, but they don't have the option of being able to stay at home necessarily, and they might need to work from home with children at home with them. So you know, everybody's busy for different reasons. And so it can feel like we don't have enough time to cook. And also there's kind of a mindset aspect to that. So if we are always rushing, preparing food, you know, say things just ready meals, or you know, things that you can just put straight in the oven, or even takeaways, and we don't have the time to cook, then we're telling ourselves that we don't have time. And so then that can stress us out, because it's reinforcing this idea that we don't have enough time, that, you know, there's never enough time for anything. That's quite stressful. So I think it's about taking a step back and looking at how we could carve out time, whether that's doing batch cooking at the weekend, or even when you do cook, doubling up the portions or tripling up, so you've got food that you can freeze. Learning how to make a quick meal in 10 minutes, because quite often you know, ready meals might take a few minutes, or maybe a little longer in the oven, but actually you could rustle up something really delicious in 10 or 15 minutes. It's just a case of knowing how to put those ingredients together and knowing how to cut corners. One of my favorite things is to either use ready diced, ready sliced vegetables, and they could be fresh or frozen, or double up, so you've got things cooking in the oven whilst you're doing the sauce on the hob, and so on. But there's all these corners you can cut and still have really good meals.
I know some of these chefs cook meals in 15 minutes, you know. I know Jamie Oliver and some of the other chefs, they have cookbooks, cook a meal in 15 minutes. And when you watch some of their programs, and I've made a few of theirs, and it works, it really works, you know. And I think there's always, I think if you're not in the right mindset, you'll always have excuses. There'd always be like a negativity towards eating healthy. But I think part of it is if you are in a good mindset and you want nutrition to be a huge part of your self-care, then you will do anything and everything to make that happen. And what is your other tip? One last tip.
So people often are attached to certain foods, and we were talking about comfort foods and sugar and so on, and it could be coffee or alcohol, or carbs, like, you know, sort of white breads and pastas, whatever it might be. And I think there's a fear that if people want to consider eating healthily, that they've got to give up their thing that they're attached to. And so sometimes, as you know, there's an emotional reason for that, and there's a lot of different layers of why that's happened, and that might take time and a lot of work to unpick. But also, you know, we can look at just making that thing that they love still be part of their diet in moderation. So just about kind of replacing some of it with more nutritious options, but also working out what they're missing. So we were talking earlier on about having cravings in the evening, and that we might actually benefit from the tryptophan foods. So it could be that their body is craving the sugar because it actually needs something else. And one example would be your adrenal glands, which deal with, well, they produce your cortisol and adrenaline hormones. And if you're pumping out a lot of adrenaline and cortisol, then you will start to have higher needs for certain minerals and certain vitamins. And the way that might show up is craving salty foods. So crisps and pizza and that sort of thing. And so it's then looking at, well, what does your body actually need? And often when you give it the things that it needs, it stops craving
the cravings,
those things so much.
A very last question. I work a lot with couples in couple therapy, and a lot of them start to drift away from each other, and it's because of also the type of foods that they're eating or not eating. And some of them, what are your little tips for my couples that that would be watching this? What are some of your aphrodisiac foods that you can advise people to healthy versions, though, instead of the chocolate and the fresh creams or whatever?
Okay, so if budget wasn't an option, apparently oysters are the best thing ever, but I've never tried one, and I'm not sure that they're that easy to get your hands on, and you know, not everybody's cup of tea. But zinc foods, apparently, so you can get those from animal foods, and they are probably higher in many animal foods, and seafood especially, but they are in things like, strangely, pumpkin seeds, some of the grains as well.
I've heard
asparagus, yes, and strawberries as well. So strawberries, and again, we were talking about really good quality dark chocolate earlier, so those sorts of things all do help. But also energy, so supporting blood sugar balance, and if our blood sugar balance isn't too good and we're feeling tired quite often, then obviously that's going to be a real killer for the libido. So yeah, definitely supporting stable energy with better quality carbohydrates as well. So like your brown grains and not the white versions. Be worth a try.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That sounds fascinating. And it's about just got like a minute left. I have to say thank you so much, and your knowledge and expertise is just amazing. And I know that all the clients that you work with, I can see how beneficial it is to actually look at nutrition and the impact nutrition has on the mindset and the body, and basically in your self-care. And you've given some amazing tips today, and so thank you so much. I know that people say a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and I think that is one of the sayings that shouldn't even be in the part of it, because you can still end up cooking healthily. You can still keep the love burning in a healthy fashion and healthy eating. And I'm going to end up with that food is such a social, it's a social activity, it's social interaction. And we live, many of us, we do live to enjoy food, and we enjoy food is part of our experiences, that we go through. So I would love to say a big thank you. Do you want to tell my community where they can catch you, where they can follow you on, and some of your social media links?
Yes, so thank you for having me. It's been really good being here. Thank you. My business is just my name with nutrition on the end, so it's Victoria Bell Nutrition. So I have an Instagram account that is just Victoria Bell Nutrition, and the same with my Facebook page. I have a group for mums as well, so if you look at my Facebook page, there's a link right up the top for mums to join, and I'm also about to launch a course, so that link is on my social media as well. So it's an 8-week course, and it's for mums to feed their healthy family, and it's
sounds exciting.
Yeah, thank you. It's interactive, and it's because it's the first round, it's all very involved and supported by myself, rather than just going on to my website and buying the course and having to get on with it on their own. So yes, if anybody's interested, I'd love to welcome them onto the course.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Victoria. Your knowledge has been amazing. So guys, this is another lovely session in the Chatty Cuppa. We know, Virginia Woolf said, one cannot think well, love well, sleep well, if one has not dined well. So the next time you are cooking dinner for your family, make sure that you have a balanced meal. And if it means you being more organized in the kitchen and making sure you have everything that you need, the healthy versions, the healthy options, then you'll actually transfer this enjoyment of food to your children and to your loved ones. Because a family that eats together stays together, especially if it's done the healthy way. Thank you so much. Lots of love. Keep smiling, and look forward to seeing you again.
Bye.